Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and once again, welcome to this segment. And this is the second segment for today. As we know, we are covering the floods here in Brisbane, and so let's take a look at what we have been able to cover so far. As we know that this morning, there have been reports of the high tide, which was at 8 a.m. and right at the moment. Well, let's take a quick look at what it's looking like right now. Let's go take a quick peek outside the window and see how things are. So there you are. That's the way it is at the moment, looking out the window. This is live coverage from Australian Indian Radio and Brisbane Indian Times. As we can see, that the water is subsiding or a little bit, as you can see from the flow, that it is going downstream, which means the tide has peaked and it's now on the return. So, and it will keep going down until midday or around 2 p.m. is when it will start turning around once again to peak once again at about 8 p.m. tonight. And there have been, unfortunately, about 7 deaths. And as you'll see from one of the reports, which I'm just about to bring to you, that, people still take a lot of chances. And this man was so lucky that he was rescued under the pontoon right here, where you're looking, right down here in Howard Street. Here's that message. So there you are, ladies and gentlemen, that the extraordinary scenes coming right to you there. Right now, let's join with our Premier to get an update on the situation right here.
At the moment, it's pushing further south down into Logan, the Albert, the Gold Coast, and now we're seeing some of the tragedies unfolding down in northern New South Wales, and our wishes are also extended to people in Lismore at the moment. Can I please say to Queenslanders, especially in the southeast of our state, we've been through a lot together. We've been through a COVID pandemic of 2 years, and now we're going through yet another flood. And many people will have been impacted, not once, not twice, but maybe even 3 times. Even though this flood is not like the 2011 floods, and the Bureau will give you more details, but in 2011, the flood peak in Brisbane was 4.46. The flood peak is 3.85 and now falling. It is still a significant event. And I think everyone would agree, no one has seen this amount of rain in such a short period of time over our entire southeast catchment zone. And I also want to extend my gratitude and thanks to the hundreds, if not thousands, of workers out there, the SES crews, the police, our fireys, our volunteers, all of the council workers. Everybody is doing an unbelievable job. The QFES alone had 2,200 requests for assistance overnight and 113 water rescues around Brisbane, the Gold Coast and Beenleigh. So these are people who are putting their own lives at risk to go and help fellow Queenslanders, and that is a very admirable trait that we have in this state, and one that I am absolutely grateful for. Currently we have 1,544 people in evacuation centres across the southeast, and more are being opened by councils. So the councils gave us a brief today, so please, if you are living in an impacted area and if you cannot remain in your home and you don't have family or close relatives nearby, there are evacuation centres available, so help is there as well. In Gympie, we have about 3,600 homes that have been impacted. In Brisbane, we're estimating there could be up to 15,000 houses that are impacted. And as I said, we're going to be monitoring very closely what happens during the rest of the day. Now, in terms of our drinking water, some good news has just come in that Mount Crosby is back up and running. Even though it's running at a reduced capacity, it is encouraging news. So we'll get an update about water. In relation to transport, all of our trains are not running in the southeast. The trams on the Gold Coast around and our emergency services need to get to people safely and quickly and respond appropriately, and this is really helping our emergency services. So thank you for doing that. And once again, we would love to have our kids back in school, but it's just not safe to do so at the moment. We'll give further update. The Education Minister will put up later on this afternoon about the situation for schools tomorrow, but we will try to get the schools open as quickly as we can, especially those that aren't impacted by water. So there may still be some school closures as well. We have around 51,000 people without power. As you can see by this is a really big event, and the event is not over. With the Mary River, we saw those really high levels in Gympie. We had Mayor George Seymour on the phone. We now expect Maryborough to peak later on today, and they could be very high levels as well. Then, of course, we're monitoring the Logan and Albert rivers. We're expecting them to peak later on, and we're also putting a watch on Dalby because this system is sort of having an impact out there as well. Then we also have 17 councils have been activated for assistance. So we'll be working very closely with now getting out and doing rapid assessments, which is the next part of our recovery phase. But let's still remember that there are people who are going through this extreme weather event at the moment. So we've also been advised that Defence have 200 personnel ready to go and help as well. So as you can see, this morning's briefing has been very, very comprehensive, and I just want to assure everyone that we are doing everything we can and working with the councils to make sure that everyone is able to respond as quickly as possible. I'll hand over to the Bureau. They'll give more information about the levels in the dams and where the flood impacts are next, so people can start thinking about their plans and if they live near these river catchment areas that are prone to flooding. And then we've got an update from police and then an update on water supply issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Premier, and good morning, everyone. Diana Eadie from the Bureau of Meteorology. The most intense rain has now eased for large parts of southeast Queensland, so the threat continues for far southern parts of the Gold Coast. Diana Eadie from the Bureau of Meteorology. The most intense rain has now eased for large parts of southeast Queensland, so the threat continues for far southern parts of the Gold Coast area and the scenic rim. So please keep updated for any warnings that get issued in those areas. But that really intense rain is now shifting into northeast New South Wales and easing for much of southeast Queensland. That being said, the risk for significant flooding is still very real. For today, I'm going to really be focusing on the Brisbane and Bremer, the Logan and Albert, and providing an update on the Mary and also the Noosa areas as well. So I'll start with the Brisbane and the Bremer rivers. For the Brisbane, we've seen river levels reach 3.85 this morning, and that is now easing. That was reached on the high tide this morning. There's still a lot of water around though, so we could see a secondary peak this evening at around about 8 p.m. At this stage, we're expecting river levels of 3.3 metres. There's another significant peak potentially to occur tomorrow morning on the high tide at approximately 9 a.m. So please make sure that you're keeping updated with the latest warnings for the Brisbane River. Now, at this stage, this peak is below what was experienced since 2011, but certainly the most significant river conditions that we've seen on the river since. For the Bremer, The Ipswich area, we've seen around about 17 metres, potentially this afternoon, so significant flooding through those areas as well. I'll now move on to the Logan and Albert. We've seen major flooding around the Bow Desert area along the Logan River. And elsewhere along the Logan, we could see river levels approaching those which were experienced during ex-tropical cyclone Debbie around so the communities around the Logan area, please take heed of that and make sure you're paying attention to those warnings as they get updated. For the Albert, seeing major flooding around the Beenleigh area. And at this stage, those sorts of levels are equivalent, if not exceeding, those experienced during Tropical Cyclone Oswald in 2013 for those communities. So still very much a real risk of significant flooding for those communities in those areas. I'll move on now to the Mary River, and for Gympie we have seen the flood peak at a level that's above the 1999 level in Gympie. The focus for the attention now as that slowly starts to subside is the Maryborough area, where we could potentially see river levels approaching those which were experienced during Tropical Cyclone Oswald. That was 10.7 metres for those communities. We're also watching the Noosa area, particularly Tewantin, could see river levels approaching the major level on the high tide this morning. So a lot of significant flooding ongoing. Please make sure that you're across all the warnings that are current. As you can see, there's still a lot of impacts, and the flood situation is still very much real, even though the worst of the rain has now subsided and moved into northeast New South Wales.
Thank you. Sorry, excuse me, tomorrow morning, what's the high tide expected to be at 9 a.m. in Brisbane?
The high tide forecast for tomorrow morning in Brisbane is expected to be 3.7 metres, just above the major level potentially for the Brisbane area.
Okay, we'll go to State Disaster Coordinator. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Premier. Good morning, everyone. I'll note that the Commissioner will shortly update us on the tragic loss of life and operations that are currently underway. But can I say, in terms of our overall operation around keeping our community safe, all of those actions that we've taken to evacuate people and get them to safety has worked very effectively, and we have had no loss of life and no persons missing in that sense. All of those persons that have got themselves into trouble have been in places where it's dangerous to be when they shouldn't be there. So the message still for all of us, even though the rain has passed, there will be still water in waterways. It will still be a dangerous environment to stay away from those, and if it's flooded, forget it. So the operation is not over. We remain in very strong response. As we go through today, in particularly areas such as Gympie and parts of Brisbane, we'll get into recovery and we'll do better assessments of how many houses and how many businesses have been actually impacted. So that data will come later. We know with the level that we've seen this morning, we are expecting many thousands of properties to have been impacted in Brisbane. And we know from what's happened in Gympie, there's around 3,600 or over 3,600 properties that we expect to have been impacted in some way. Pardon me. We currently have 1,544 persons in evacuation centres, and there's 36 of them operating across the southeast corner, and that includes 327 in Moreton, 331 persons in Brisbane, 449 in Gympie, and 173 in our Toowoomba area. And there are other areas that are opening, and as we see the day unfold in Logan and the Gold Coast, we may well see increases there. The Premier mentioned the large number of persons without power. The message to everyone is to please be patient. Our authorities are working very hard to restore power, but some may expect some extended outages, and it could take some time to return that to them. As always, if people need assistance, if it's something to do with their house, leaky roofs, 132 500 to SES. Bear in mind there's a high load, and I'm sure Commissioner Leach will talk about this. But as always, if anyone's at threat, please ring 000. We'll now turn our focus to Maryborough. So we're expecting a fairly significant peak there. It was around the 10-metre mark in January this year. We're expecting it to be around 2.7 metres or higher, so we're expecting a significant flood there today, so our focus is preparing for that. And certainly as Gympie, the water starts to reside, we're restoring services. And I should mention too that right across the southeast corner we have small communities that have been isolated for some time. So we have a very strong focus on making sure that we get resupply to those people, that we support that. And that has included using air assets, including the ADF, who are incredibly grateful for their assistance. During the whole in the whole response, we've had over 100 emergency alert campaigns, and that equates to nearly 6.6 million messages that have gone out to our community. Our focus, as you've heard, is now on Logan and the Gold Coast area. We're continually being updated. The message for all of those people in those areas, again, it's a dangerous environment. Please stay safe. If it's flooded, forget it. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. As you've heard, sadly, we have had a 7th death overnight. A 59-year-old male person swept up in floodwaters at Beams Road at Tygum. We do have a number of other people that we hold grave concerns for. There was reports of a missing vehicle swept into floodwaters at Yatala this morning that we are currently investigating. Also, a male person seen to enter a flooded area to retrieve animals at Goodna last night that we are following up on. As I came in, a report of a missing person also near Esk. And as you would recall, some 2 days ago, a male person had fallen from a vessel in the Brisbane River that we are also following up on. The operational tempo has been absolutely extraordinary over the last couple of days. Over 1,900 jobs in the southeast, calls for service in relation to flood-related matters just in the last 24 hours. It has been an extraordinary response from police, fire, SES, volunteers and even members of the public and our assistance from the ADF. Can I thank the Australian Defence Force for their air assets in particular in the last few days and continuing to assist us as we go into recovery. Please do not be complacent today. Even though the weather system is moving away, it is going into the southeast and the operational tempo remains considerably high in that area. However, there is still a lot of water on the roads. There are so many roads that are cut off in Brisbane alone. I ask that you actually be very, very careful if you have to move around, but if you don't, please stay at home, other than those obviously that need to evacuate. Can I sincerely thank the public over the last few days? This has been a mammoth effort, and with your compliance and your assistance, it's greatly assisted us to do our job. However, as always, heed the warnings, listen to authorities, and as always, if it's flooded, please forget it. Thank you.
Commissioner Leach.
Good morning. Last night was the busiest night of this campaign for Queensland Fire and Emergency Services. We received 2,200 requests for assistance to the State Emergency Service and 113 calls to the Fire and Rescue Service and water-related rescues that were carried out up until 6:30 this morning. But we're currently involved in a number of rescue operations across Brisbane, down through Beenleigh and into the Gold Coast. If I could acknowledge the contribution of our selfless State Emergency Service volunteers and staff who continue to be out in community doing what they can. Also our fire and rescue firefighters trained as swift water technicians, done a terrific job over the last week. We have our rural fire service volunteers standing by to assist with clean-up. As soon as the floodwaters start to recede, our rural fire brigades will be ready to assist with washout operations and helping communities get back on their feet. We've been well supported also by Volunteering Queensland. We've had support offered from the Surf Lifesaving Queensland, who have offered trained volunteers and inflatable boat operators. We've also been contacted by interstate jurisdictions, and we have a number of swiftwater technicians who will join us from Victoria to supplement some of our crews here in Queensland. And they've also offered SES support, damage assessors to assist us in coming days and weeks should we need it. If I could also acknowledge the Australian Defence Force through the disaster assistance to the civil community arrangements. We have 4 helicopters that have been assisting with operations here in southeast Queensland over recent days. But the operations are ongoing. We've got significant activity happening down through the Gold Coast and Beenleigh at the moment. We're continuing to respond to the calls in and around Brisbane. We thank you for your patience. We know this is a difficult time and we're trying to get to you as quick as we can. Please, if you don't need to be on the roads today, stay at home, leave the roads open for residents who do need to get in and out, and for first responders to get to the tasks that they need to. Thank you.
Transport, Ms. Wells.